Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Insights and Innovation series for this wonderful Monday. We are almost at the end of the year, almost about to fall over the finishing line, and we've got a very, very exciting and fun guest today, the wonderful Val Morgan, that are wonderful supporters of the INAA and the independent sector. In fact, the before-mentioned event at the Hoyt Cinema will be hosted by Val Morgan, so we're good partners of Indies. Today we're talking to Dom. And he's going to talk us through some of the big cultural moments and how to tap into that. We know that, tapping into cultural moments is a good way of building a connection with an audience. So without further ado, I'm going to let Dom take over, and I will keep my big K-hole shut. Over to you, Dom.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. I am just going to present my screen, everyone. Sam, just give me a yell out when it comes up. Just
we'll do that. It's not coming up.
So
go to presenter mode. Perfect.
How's that looking?
Perfect.
Awesome. I've lost my notes on this screen, but I think I should be okay. Sorry, I'm just going to try one more way of doing this. Apologies.
Maybe, Josh, you might have some jokes to share or a song.
Jokes would be good now, Josh. Okay. How's that?
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you, team. Thank you, Sam, for handing it on. Really excited, everyone, to talk about big cultural moments. We'll be talking specifically about cinema a bit, but also we're going to talk about what culture means in media and what it means for brands to invest in true cultural moments. So this presentation was kind of perfectly timed for the cultural phenomenon that a lot of you may know as Barbenheimer this year. An amazing cinematic event, amazing movement of two incredible films that I'll go into in a bit more detail, and we'll talk about a few other cultural moments within cinema as well. But what we're going to talk about today is the science behind cultural moments, and specifically I'm going to be running through the findings of our Insights, which some of you may know, that ran a study looking at the definition and impact of culture and what it does for brands. And we'll be chatting through why films are so impactful behind culture as well. Films like Barbie and Oppenheimer. And for the movie buffs, if you're wondering, I don't know if my background's still showing, but I had a Lion King background before, because that will definitely be one of the biggest cultural moments for next year across a multi-generational kind of audience. The first film of the live-action remake of The Lion King is one of the biggest films of all time. Top 10 in Australia, actually, and there's a remake for the prequel of Mufasa live action for next year release. So huge film, and that's kind of the big next cultural moment within cinema. But not just talking specifically cinema, I'll be talking about, again, cultural moments within all media and the impact that has for brands. And also for the movie buffs, there'll be images of different from different films and famous cultural images from different films on each slide, which you might be able to pick up. So firstly, let's go into the definition of what is culture. There's many definitions of culture, but for the purpose of today, this quote is directly from Matt Samuel, who's the director of our Insights. And culture is the ideas, influence, and social behavior shared collectively by particular people or community defined at a given time. So, when we think of this, we can define culture by, our experiences in everyday life, society, our typical behaviors of the people we live within in our community, or, a big moment in a particular time. And I'm really going to talk about why culture is an important consideration when talking about media. So to do that, we'll first have to understand what influences culture, because culture is what defines us today, and it can be a huge catalyst for change as well. So why is culture important for brands. As I mentioned on the last slide, a lot of what we'll be going through is the outcomes of the Val Insights research of why culture is important to brands. But you can see here when we're talking about what's important for the cultural media space, there's really 3 reasons here why the Val Insights believe culture is important, and why it's important for brands to embrace culture as well. So culture is about imprinting brand values. It's reaching audiences through big cultural moments, and the outcome of that is the positive brand reputation and, of course, purchasing. So when we're thinking about defining cultural moments, think of moments like the Olympics, State of Origin, big live event TV like Maths, blockbuster movies like Barbie, or even just local events. These are all pulling people in different directions, and they all gravitate to people, bringing them to shared collective moments. And they're all collectively important to different groups of people. And we know that culture is broad and dynamic. It's across all different facets. When I think of the biggest cultural moments of this year, I kind of already mentioned it, but the Matildas reaching the semi-finals of the World Cup, amazing cultural moment for Australia. And it was a huge female, movement and power moment when that happened, and cinemas were pink with Barbie at the same time. So when we think about what cultural moments do, what do they do for people? They allow them 4 points here. There are 4 needs that cultural media moments fulfill, and this is what makes them really powerful. So the 4 focus groups identified are that they allow people to reflect, connect, think, and inspire. So reflecting, you think in activities that are familiar to people or people have a long-standing passion for, and they allow people time and space to immerse in them. Connecting, cultural moments are, it has a universal appeal for particular fans, bringing them together. Thinking, activities that are not regularly undertaken, but new experiences outside people's comfort zone. And of course, inspire, activities that bring people together around something bigger and better than the everyday. A standout moment, or a view to the future, or a focus on the better. And if we look at this framework that came from the cultural moments research from the OWL, this was to capture the multidimensional nature of cultural moments and how it reignites the senses. And the real big thing here for culture is that connection. Connection is everyone collectively talking about the moments that bring us together. Think about those true kind of water cooler moments. You come into work the next day, you're all talking about the film you saw in the weekend, or the show you watched last night, or how great the Matildas did in the World Cup. Any kind of big sporting moment, provide those true moments of connection. And the importance of human connection. So again, direct results from our research. It's no secret, obviously, that the nature of COVID and lockdowns has had a profound effect on our perception of human connection. The current climate has driven a shift towards collective moments that bring people together, and creating something based around common interests for like-minded individuals creates something far bigger than the constituent parts. So connection and reflection, particularly with groups like with your family, with your friends, these are things that are so important and most important to people for all types of cultural and leisure activities as well. Those shared experiences, people are placing particular importance on. And I've kind of mentioned these moments as well, but when we look at those moments that truly connect, so we know that media gravitates towards sport and TV for cultural moments. And, if any of you on the call right now think of when you're doing your media buying, you're probably looking for those true cultural moments when you're looking at these particular media. How can you get involved in sport? And, that amazing run that the Matildas did last year is that big cultural moment. We all remember that photo there when they won that quarterfinal. TV, House of Dragon was one of the big releases in the last couple of years. We all think about where we are where we were when we spoke about those big episodes when they dropped the day after, when we spoke about them with particular groups of people that were interested in the show. And then of course movies, which I'll be basing a lot of the presentation on today, but movies provide those true cultural moments. And I've mentioned it many times, but Barbie was a true cultural moment, not just in cinema, not just in film, but in many ways across that couple of months, which I'll go through in a lot more detail as well. So based on the research we're going to run through today, we know that there are more ways to tap into culture as well. And we know that cultural moments are changing, especially in the television landscape. So ad-supported event TV is harder to come by. We know that TV audiences are declining. Those kind of tentpole titles that we reach out for, those true cultural moments, they're getting more and more important. We know that event TV switches off over summer as well. In terms of those key tentpole titles, that's the time when a lot of brands will invest in cricket and sport over that summer period. And there's an increase now in looking at ad-free SVOD platforms, which we know is going to increase year on year as those as the SVOD platforms introduce new ad-supported formats. So the world of TV has changed dramatically. Free-to-air TV now revolves around catch-up viewing rather than appointment to view, thanks to the rise of broadcast video on demand. And we know that SVOD at the moment, it can be a bit unpredictable. We know how important of the source of entertainment it is. But sometimes it's incredibly difficult to predict the shows that are going to impact culture for brands to invest in. So, example, no one saw the cultural phenomenon that Squid Game was going to be, and it was hard for, I guess, brands to really invest in that prior to that show coming out. It became one of the biggest cultural phenomenons worldwide. And with the cost of living increases being a problem for most Australians, we know that SVOD subscriptions are shown to be some of the first things Aussies cut back on, highlighting the expendable nature of having the multiple streaming services that most of us do have at the moment. And as this has reshaped viewing habits as well. So a hugely popular way to watch TV, audiences now watching content at different speeds. And the fear of spoilers has made water cooler moments increasingly difficult to come by. So, people aren't watching a show on the same night because they have the opportunity to binge, every episode on the weekend or to catch up, and they're not talking about all those key moments together. So that binging reduces the impact of event TV as well. So we saw that Netflix had a two-part release strategy for key titles. And this intended to manage audiences' speed of viewing to attempt to reintroduce those water cooler moments without spoiling the ending. So rather than release the whole series, they'd release, volume 1, 6-part episodes, and then the next 6 episodes at a later date. So there wasn't that binge watching across all SVOD platforms. And a really, great quote here is, as I've mentioned, audiences are watching the same shows, but in different environments, and most importantly, at different speeds, making those true water cooler TV moments harder to come by, as I mentioned. But we know that cinema hits different. So, a lot of the slides, obviously, I'll be talking about, the experience of watching a film in a cinema, the experience of films in general for true water cooler moments. But the power of the channel is in the collective experience. It's about going into a cinema together and watching that film together and talking about that cultural moment together in a shared occasion, in a collective shared environment for a true cultural moment. So it's the same people in the same place, all talking about that same film. And we know that's harder to come by, and cinema still can deliver that for brands. The Our research, they've actually mapped out the cultural framework where everything sits. So, when you're talking about the collective experience for TV, live sport, and cinema, and you can see here how well, in terms of connection for that collective experience, how well cinema and live sport on TV sit there. So cinema kind of fits in perfectly for getting Aussies out of the everyday for those true moments of connection together. Now, this is a really great quote from Steven Spielberg, one of the biggest directors in the world, which I'm sure a lot of you would know. In a movie theater, you watch movies with significant others in your life, but also in the company of strangers. When the experience makes us laugh or cry or cheer or contemplate, then when the lights come up and when we leave our seats, the people with whom we head out in the real world don't feel like strangers anymore. We become a community. I love this quote because you definitely get a sense of that when you leave the cinema and you all collectively talk about it, when you're in the foyer, about the moments that were so funny, if you're watching a comedy, or those, really big, action films, and how they all made you feel watching it all together in a cinema. So our research asked people as well how important different options were in creating cultural moments for them. So I think this chart really shows the power of shared experiences as defining culture, because you can see here watching live sport on TV, and it's no surprise, being Australians, we know how important sport is to our culture. That sport is number one. But cinema is just behind it. So people viewed as going to the cinemas to watch big blockbuster movies as really important cultural events for them. And having that important collective experience. So why is cinema so important? I think the most important part of my role at Val Morgan and working within movies and talking about films all day, it is about the films. Movies mirror culture. Movies have historically played their part as influencers of culture en masse. We can all think of different types of films, and I'll go into a few examples shortly as well. But movies reflect culture through their narratives, their characters, and the way movies make us feel about them, about the contemporary issues that they're showing or addressing as well. All those comedies, they make us laugh. The psychological thrillers help us see the world from new perspectives. Historical films help us understand where we've come from as people. And every film can reflect society, create conversations, and of course, transform opinions. They shape our cultural attitudes and customs, and they're an integral part of us. They mirror what we believe and how we coexist as people. And it's easier to see our concerns, attitudes, flaws, and strengths in films than it is to decipher them from our daily interactions. So, when our prevalent beliefs and ideologies are challenged in films, we're sometimes able to interrogate ourselves and embrace change. And I'll go through some examples of that as well. So we know that movies play a pivotal role in modern culture, but how does the environment have an impact is the question we ask. So here's some examples of movies that are so culturally powerful. And some would be so obvious, and a lot that you would have seen as well, everyone in the call today. So Top Gun. It's credited as being a flashpoint for a shift in how the American public viewed the military. It was an amazing thing to join the military and be Tom Cruise. They saw huge. I don't have the number with me. I do remember it from last year when Top Gun Maverick came out, but they saw huge increases in people joining the military in America when that film came out. Huge cultural moment. Another big cultural moment from that Top Gun film for a brand was Ray-Bans. They saw massive increases in their sales for their sunglasses when that film came out because of how well Tom Cruise rocked them. And that happened the same thing for last year with the huge Top Gun Maverick coming out, being a huge success in cinema. Philadelphia with Tom Hanks, another example. It was the first big time that a big Hollywood star tackled the perception of AIDS in America, and that was a huge cultural shift for AIDS. And AIDS, talking about AIDS in huge cultural media like a film. Priscilla, that huge film helped introduce the LGBT themes to a mainstream audience in the 1990s, and that paved the way, for many films that we see today as well. Black Panther drove deeper conversations about representation and race. Amazing film that really embraced, Black culture and showed that throughout, and won many awards as well. And Parasite raised questions of social inequality while spotlighting foreign language cinema. So, and we know that how well foreign language shows and cinema are doing now from films like Parasite and obviously Squid Game as well. So our biggest cultural moments in the last few years, I mentioned Top Gun Maverick, just an incredible success last year. If you didn't see it in a cinema, huge miss because it needed to be seen on the biggest screen possible. And that made us see that blockbusters were back in the cultural conversation in 2022. Some of you might not know about the Gentle Minions TikTok trends that happened. So when the Minions film came out last year, TikTokers were going to see the film in their suits, teenagers, and there's a big TikTok craze about it. Don't really understand it, but yeah, it was a huge thing on TikTok. The Super Slap, we all know how big of a moment that was. Big Oscars moment that will be remembered for decades when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. And then this is an example of a viral social media trend that saw people using AI to recreate iconic films in the style of Wes Anderson, which was really cool and went viral on social media. But of course, we need to talk about the phenomenon that was Barbie. And the reason why we keep talking about it as well is because we did forecast how big it was going to be. It went a lot bigger than what we thought, but we knew it was going to be a cultural phenomenon moment. And we always talk about ways for brands to invest in those huge cultural moments. And this was the big opportunity of 2023. So movies have shown to dominate the cultural conversation like no other platform can. So if you look at the Google trends for some of the biggest cultural moments across all media, when you're thinking of live sport, event TV and film, Barbie's opening weekend here, you can see the Google trends were just off the chain, and they really continued throughout the whole kind of couple of weeks after the film released as well, really for the 6 to 8 weeks when the film was in cinemas, as it just continued to admissions continued to increase week to week. So you can see there in Google, people were Googling Barbie. They were wanting to find out about the film, Margot Robbie, all those kind of things. And you just couldn't miss Margot Robbie when you logged on to your Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, wherever. And it really, if we talk about Barbie and Oppenheimer collectively, a lot of you may have seen both films in the cinema. Barbie is now the 6th biggest film of all time in Australia, which was just incredible. It did around $85 million at our Australian box office, which, to give you context, the box office in Australia is around $10 million at the box office. So, big films would do around that amount. But yeah, it did 8 times that amount. We certainly didn't forecast it to do that well, but it really was the biggest cultural moment of 2023. And with that, it was the best marketed dual release in living memory with Oppenheimer. And that piqued everyone's curiosity, and it built and built and built upon release. So, they released first images of Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie, and everyone was interested to see how they're going to portray Barbie and Ken. And then on social media, everyone was talking about those images that were first released, and they slowly released more and more images. It was the perfect way to release a movie, and I know that studios are going to look at that moving forward to see what they did so well. Brands, I mean, the world, Sydney, everywhere just turned pink. When Margot Robbie came to Sydney, she did about 7 main cities around the world, a big tour. But everywhere turned pink. You can see the image there of icebergs, Bondi icebergs, and the pool there at Bondi, where she wore the iconic Barbie outfit, and they had Barbie branding everywhere. Brands got involved. I mean, lucky for these brands, they did amazing activations. Airbnb had a Malibu house. There was a pink burger grilled. One of the bubble tea brands did an amazing, Barbie activation with pink bubble teas. Xbox was getting involved. Brands just turned pink in the lead up to this film and during the film's release. And then when we look at, why the 2 films did so well together, the release of Barbie just really helped the release of Oppenheimer as well. 2 totally different films, and it created a cultural phenomenon known as Barbenheimer. And, you know, there were so many fan-made posters like the one you can see on the screen now. And it was the biggest two-film release in history, essentially. So just huge cultural moment that, you know, we'll be talking about for a very long time. So importantly, how can cinema help connect brands to culture and cultural moments like Barbenheimer? Here are 4 sections that I'll be chatting through. So it's all about leveraging those emotional connection and passion points. We know that cinema is an eyes-on channel, so the content and the channel demand attention within that cinema environment. Cinema drives brand outcomes. It's a platform that is proven to increase key brand metrics, and I'll run through a bit of that with you today. And we've got a constant stream of big cultural moments. There's always another major cultural moment around the corner. So, you know, that's why I had the image of the Lion King. I'm wearing a Ghostbusters top. That will be another big cultural moment for next year. And our slate for the next 12 months is absolutely insane. It's changed a little bit with the strikes that have been going on. But before those strikes, we had a blockbuster release every 2 weeks next year. So the window's changed a little bit, but the 2024 slate is we're looking at being even bigger than 2023. So it's going to be a very exciting year with a lot of big content coming out and a lot of key cultural moments. So those emotional connections. People love movies and audiences have deep connections to movies. And if you look at fan bases across different big franchises, you can see here they're always consuming content of these franchises, and they want to see when this content comes to the cinema, they're the first to come to the cinema and watch these films. So, you know, the biggest fan bases we can think of, you know, like Star Wars, look at their online fandom visits. This is just in Australia for Star Wars content. Harry Potter is still huge. Marvel content, we know how big that is. They release their kind of key tentpole titles, you know, generally every quarter recently. And then DC content as well, with Batman and Superman being the other big superhero franchise. And people love movie stars. And obviously social media has amplified this in recent years. So we saw how much everyone loved Margot Robbie dressing up in a new Barbie outfit every day, essentially at every premiere in every new city. But audiences have huge connections to those movie stars as well. So, you know, you just have to look at the fan bases of someone like The Rock and Zendaya, huge social media following, and that has a huge influence on people as well. And when they're talking about their films coming to cinema, that has a huge cultural impact too. And the connection to content influences mindset as well. So when we're more emotionally invested in the content that we're consuming that with a real positive mindset. And there's just some awesome facts there as well. You know, we're happier in a cinema because it's a platform that we're paying to see, and we're making the time to go watch. So we're in a very positive mindset when we're sitting in that seat in anticipation for a film to start. And we know it's an eyes-on channel as well. So we know that emotion drives behavior. So important for brands. So if you look at this stat from Think TV on what emotion does for driving purchasing power, 85% of consumer purchases are driven by emotional attachment. And there's no better way to have an emotional attachment than for a brand to align with a big film or a franchise that consumers absolutely love. And we know that the bigger budgets mean bigger returns. So, you know, this is to spotlight all that talkability when films are investing big marketing in the lead up to their big blockbuster releases in cinema. If we compare it to something like reality TV, like Married at First Sight, you can see here the production is around $2 million per episode, and the whole series is around $15 million. When you're talking like a film like Barbie, the budget, you know, marketing budget alone is around $20 to $50 million in Australia. Animated films, we know how big the Super Mario film was in Australia. Again, huge marketing budget for that film. and big action films. We released the 10th Fast and Furious film this year, again with a huge budget in terms of production and marketing leading in for that one. And of course, there's a Vin Diesel just won't go away, and there is another one coming in another 18 months. And we know the hits in advance, and they do deliver. So this slide just shows us our forecasted admissions for a film, and then the actual admissions for the film. So we know when we're talking to brands what the biggest films will be, and we can talk about why you should invest in them for particular brands. If it's a film like Minions and you're a brand targeting families, then we know the admissions target. In this case, you can see that we over-delivered our admissions. The blue line is the actual admissions delivered in Australian cinemas. But you can see here, we know when big blockbuster releases are coming out, and we know that they're going to deliver big audiences. We didn't include Barbie on this slide because I think that went 4 times our admissions forecast. So we didn't see how big that one was going to be. But again, if you did invest in that, you were absolutely cheering because the audience well over-delivered. And when we're looking at the massive glamorous industry, that Hollywood is and cinema is, films, this is perceived better for brands and brand fame, and it's the reason why ads in a cinema are perceived bigger and better as well. So 50% of respondents on a Cantor Millward Brown study agreed that ads look better in a cinema, and that makes total sense when you think about the cinema environment. It's an eyes-on advertising platform. You're sitting in a dark cinema looking at the biggest screen possible, and there's no bigger screen media can buy. We just launched IMAX recently as well, which is amazing, and it's a distraction-free environment, and we've done so much work and study and research on the total attention of cinema as well. So attention, as we know, is a bit of a buzzword in media and marketing as well. And amazingly, when we looked at the total attention of cinema, we did work with Amplified Intelligence. So externally, Dr. Karen Nielsen-Field looked at all screens in terms of attention, and the results for cinema were amazing. So essentially, we had 100% total attention with 0% wastage for consumers that were sitting in a cinema consuming our advertising content in the pre-show. So when I talk about total attention, that's 100% passive attention. So there's 2 types of different attention that you can see on the slide there. Passive attention, you might have a bit of a distraction, like your eyes might be, focusing on your snacks, or maybe, talking to someone in the cinema. But then over 60% active attention, and that's no distraction with your eyeballs staring directly at the screen. And that's huge for brands when we're talking about, what are you actually getting for every dollar you're investing in terms of audience? Are they actually viewing the content? And the results for cinema were phenomenal. We know that cinema drives brand outcomes as well. So when I look at this, we talk about cinema being the most memorable media platform. So again, referring to the Cantor Millward Brown research that we recently did, cinema delivers higher brand resonance than any other channel and at a lower frequency. So you can look at, this is a really important stat to say, the retention rate of what people remembered from the advertising, huge numbers here for cinema. So you didn't have to have that high frequency that you may need on a digital platform or an audio platform. You just needed that long form creative to play once for someone to really remember it in the following weeks. So that was amazing research that came out from Cantor Millward Brown there. And cinema supercharges a brand's power to be noticed. So throughout all the brand lift studies, we aggravated out the results, and this was the awareness here. So we had a 60% uplift in advertising awareness when a brand was exposed in cinema. And yeah, amazing results there. And when brands invest in cultural moments, there's an uplift in perceptions. We know that films can supercharge this perception. So aligning with cultural moments supercharges a brand's ability to drive those perceptions, to have a higher opinion of a brand, And the average uplift that we saw from campaigns, from brands investing in cinema campaigns, significantly increased for brands as well. Aligning with cultural moments also helps to drive consideration. So driving more consideration for brands, obviously. So, consideration in future after running cinema campaigns, seeing, using or buying in brands increased. And, the first choice in a category for a brand that invested in cinema as well. We saw amazing results when we did some research there as well. So, if you have any questions on these kind of things, you can absolutely reach out to me individually, and I can run through in more detail, but just amazing results to see the brand uplift that a cinema campaign can deliver. And just lastly, when we talk about the biggest cultural moments coming soon, so I've spoken about the cultural moments that have kind of really delivered in the last 12 to 18 months. But we really are home to the biggest cultural moments. And we're talking short term, we'll talk about the summer period and all the films that are coming out. So the Marvels just released last week, which is a big Marvel tentpole title. There's another Hunger Games prequel that comes out this week. The Hunger Games franchise has a huge database of fans, so we're expecting big numbers for that. And then it just goes on and on. With family audiences, there's key animation titles that are still to come out for summer across the key summer holiday period. If you're a Gladiator fan and a Ridley Scott fan and a Joaquin Phoenix fan, we got a taste of one of the battle scenes in Napoleon that's coming out at the end of November. Incredible. Ridley Scott and Joaquin Phoenix team up again, and Joaquin Phoenix is playing Napoleon. That is going to be a massive blockbuster for us. The Wonka film is kind of our key big title that's coming out in December for those family audiences. Then those key blockbuster titles like Aquaman. We know how well the first film did with Jason Momoa, and that's going to be a huge film for superhero fans. And then we're leading into kind of the award season. So we know that the Oscars and the Golden Globes at the beginning of the next year, and a lot of those big films that are up for nominations tend to come out in that January period for the movie buffs. So many big films that are coming out over summer, and that kind of just continues on to next year as well, which is really exciting. And when we look at those key audiences over that summer period as well, whether you have a female focus, there's big films. So I spoke about that female power movement, with the Matildas and the Barbie film. That kind of really continues with, all female casts in movies like the Marvels, and female-led casts in other films as well. Madam Web is another Spider-Man film. We know how big the Spider-Man franchise is. That comes out in March next year. That features Sydney Sweeney as Spider-Woman. So big film there for the superhero fans. More action epics are coming out as well. Family adventures. Disney continues to drive huge films in cinema. There's another Trolls film coming out. Wonka film I mentioned. It's a prequel with Timothée Chalamet playing the famous Willy Wonka. Musical films. There's so many of them coming out. We saw a preview for Bob Marley that looks absolutely incredible for any of the fans of his music. And then the summer of sport as well. So there's a lot of, sport kind of themed films coming out in the January period. There's a biopic of Ferrari coming out in January with Adam Driver starring as Enzo Ferrari. So that's looking really good as well. And then to end the presentation, thought we'd finish with a quote from the famous Martin Scorsese. Movies touch our hearts, awaken our vision, and change the way we see things. They take us to other places, they open doors and minds, and movies are, of course, memories of our lifetime. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you all. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dom. Always exciting to see new movies coming out as well, and how it's connecting brands and audiences together. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. We have the AGM coming up at the 24th. We've got a Christmas party, couple seats left on the boat for the leaders. We have Trends Report, the future guiding principles of AI coming out as well. And we look forward to a very, very exciting 2024, which we're going to talk about soon. Thank you, Dom. Thank you, Val Morgan, for your support. And thank you for hosting us always at these wonderful conferences that we do. Thank you, guys. Talk to everyone soon.
Thanks, Sam. See you, everyone.